Here we go.
Do it.
Okay, cool.
Here we go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Coffin Talkin', where we unravel the mysteries, embrace the peculiar, and find humor in the unconventional world of funerals and death. I'm Holly. I'm here with Frank, and Scott has joined us again today. We're going to be doing something a little bit different today, a question and answer session where we compile all of the questions that you guys have sent in so far and get Frank to answer them. So Scott will be leading that charge for us. And after answering all of the questions that we've prepared today, we will have time for a Let's Be Frank, but instead of one of my dad's stories, it will be one of your stories that you've submitted into us. So I will be reading that for my dad's reaction and Scott's reaction, and we can discuss it further. But before jumping in, let's see how everyone's week was.
So mine was great. It ended strong and a couple of funeral services, and it was good. We usually in the building or the business we do a lot of catering to cremation. And so just the cremation side is a normal thing. But when you throw in memorial services or funeral services, it's a good week. It's good.
Good. Scott, anything new to report?
No?
I have a question.
Okay.
Last time you were on, you said, I'm single, ladies, but that might change by the next time I'm on. So I'm here for all the ladies that are looking for that update.
Well, guess what? I'm not here for all the ladies anymore. That is what I'll say.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So the podcast really did work for you.
It
Wow.
was immediate. It was
immediate.
The same day. It was flooding that emails that we had.
Well, that's
wow. That's amazing.
It is amazing. Wow.
And that's what I'll say. I don't know if they'd be comfortable with names or anything. So that is what that is what I will say. But the week was also very good. I had a chance to go and see in our church. There is it's called a primary program. It's all the really young kids, and they share songs, they share scriptures and stories, and it was a blast. Those are always so fun. It's always so fun to see all the little kids and what they're learning. So it was good. Yeah.
Weren't you out of town for a little while as well? Where did you go?
I was out of town. I visited a friend in Tucson. A good friend from school, and his wife also from school that I knew growing up, and so went with another good friend of mine, and that was great. Yeah.
My turn.
Yes.
Well, let me show you, because this is the best update I've had so far. So anyways,
okay.
We all remember a couple weeks ago when I said that we fell in love with the dog, and then our landlord said no dogs. But this weekend, 2 little girls came to our front door and they said, we found these kittens and they're going to die in the cold. Do you want one? So now we have a kitten.
Oh my gosh.
And it's sleeping on my lap right now. I'm going to wake her up. Her name's Nellie.
Oh, Nellie, look at her. What is she, an orange cat? Is she orange with stripes?
I don't know. I have no idea anything about cats.
It's a pretty kitten.
Yeah, she's very pretty, but we'll see how it goes.
Holly, tell me what you showed me this cat yesterday when we talked, and what was it that you said? I asked specifically about the landlord, and what did you remember the response that you gave me?
I think I said that cats are easier to hide than dogs, and
okay, yeah, great.
And if she shows up, all you have to do is put the cat outside.
Exactly. Then it's an outdoor cat.
Yeah, cats from the neighborhood.
Yeah. Oh, yes, we're talking about you.
Oh, my gosh. Well, congratulations, Holly.
Thank you.
Do you think you're going to keep the cat?
I think we're going to keep her as long as we
Okay.
can.
Okay.
But
Well,
she's just a sweetheart. She's so fun. We ordered a laser pointer and everything.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Cats are so independent. You're
Yeah.
going to find out. You can't call them. They just mind their own business. And they
I
just do what
know.
they want. They do what they
Just do
want.
their thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
You should try just taping the putting tape on the laser pointer so it's always on, and tape it to
Always
the fan.
on.
Tape it to the what?
To what?
Tape it to a ceiling fan, and just see what happens. I'm
She'd
curious.
never stop. There'd be a hole in my carpet where just a huge ring
Mm-hmm.
where it's just worn out.
Yeah, and don't let her claw your furniture.
Yeah, she's really good, actually. She doesn't.
Okay.
She claws up my rug, but I'm fine with that.
Okay.
As long as it's not my couch. I don't
Yeah. Okay. All right.
But I think that about wraps it up. So, Scott, let's hear those questions.
Absolutely, and again, we'll give that that disclaimer that is usually at the beginning of the episode. Some of these questions are, I guess, sensitive in nature, and so we'll just be aware of those things. Let's go into a first question sent in from Janina. This is a really interesting one. The question is, how does transportation, so obviously we're talking about a deceased individual, how does transportation across state lines work? And maybe if you could add a little something about country lines as well, because we have done both of those. You and I have, Dad.
Okay. So transportation, first of all, there's always permits that will need to be filed with the state, the originating state, for individuals to go either over state lines or international transportation. So when you say transfer someone out of the state, it's usually, when I say that, it's usually within the United States themselves. So we're transferring from one state to another, let's say. You can either do that by vehicle, personal vehicle. Families can do that if they want, or we can go ahead and commission a commercial carrier to go ahead and transport that individual that's passed away. If the family chooses to do it, we will go ahead and make sure that all the necessary permits are available to the family to go ahead and pick up, and then have the deceased ready for transportation. Can either be in what we call a combination unit or in a casket, and the family can go ahead and transfer their loved one to another state if they want, via car, van, suburban. We've seen them all, travel trailers, U-Haul trucks. So that's one way. The other way is if we put the individual on a commercial airline. Again, the permits, they're the same, but the airline, it has to be booked, and sometimes they can't get them to a location that in time for services, only because of weight issues. And so they always ask us the weight of the individual with the casket, how much that's going to weigh. And then if the airline, looking at all the other cargo and what they expect on the cargo hold, because that's where individuals are placed when they're transferred by a common carrier, then they'll go ahead and book it for us and allow us to go ahead and bring that individual to the warehouse area of the airport and where the transfer is made. And we can go ahead and then just go ahead and have the person put on an airline. International shipping, what you're talking about, Scott, what we have actually done in the past, we've traveled to Hermosillo quite a few times, and same with Sonora. And so a lot of families like us to do that by van. And so it's a full day process, right, Scott? It does take us the whole day to drive down and turn around and come back. It is a full day, especially if we're going to Hermosillo. The permitting is a little bit different. The consulate has to get involved, and the paperwork is extensive. Instead of 2 documents, which would be done internationally, you're now looking at 13 to 14 sheets of paper that now need to be filled and filed for that to actually occur. But it can be done and can be done within the time frame that most people want. So people are happy with that. But if it's further than what we want to drive, we will suggest that we place the individual on an airplane to get them to their location. Once they reach that location, they have to have another mortuary that would then meet that airline. And so that airline would then release that deceased individual to that receiving funeral home, we call them, and then allow them to go ahead and bring that deceased into their care.
I have a question here. So how would that change the cost for people if they're wanting over state lines?
Okay, so traveling, if a family chooses to do that on their own, of course, they're using their own vehicle. So for us, the cost doesn't change, nor would it change for the family, except for the fact that now they're using wear and tear on their own vehicle, plus gassing their own vehicle. So depending upon where it's going, all those expenses would then be handled by the family. The only thing that would be added to it would be the airfare, and that is usually depending upon what part of the world or country they're going, or even state they're going to, can range anywhere from $400 to upwards of $3,200, depending upon where we're going.
So another question that I had regarding that, and I don't want to spend too much time on this one, but as far as the airfare goes, if you select the airline, is it possible if I'm flying out to see someone that there could be a deceased individual on that same flight, or are they separate flights? Are these passenger airlines that they go on?
They are. And if you've ever sat in a window seat and looked at luggage coming in and off the airline, you can actually see it's a large rectangular container. It's got a plywood bottom, a cardboard top, and it's strapped down with either white or black straps. And you'll know because there'll be a little embossed area on there that says head, HEAD. And if you see that on there, you know that's a cadaver that's being loaded onto your plane.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's awesome. Next question. This one was submitted from Mary. She asks, has there ever been a situation where the family requests an open casket viewing, but maybe circumstances around the cause of the death of the individual might prohibit that or might make you think twice about that? What do you do in that situation?
So that is a definite yes. So every situation is different. I'm going to share one with you specifically. We had an individual family contact us whose son had passed away. And when we brought him into our care, he looked great. I thought to myself, okay, this will be, regardless of how he passed away, we can go ahead and make the corrections necessary to allow him to be viewed. So I didn't really think much about it. So the embalming went on, was fine. And then his tissue continued to swell. So we call that tissue gas. And so what that means essentially is that the skin is not allowing, when tissue or when cells break down, they will expand, and essentially there's a small explosion within the body, but the body has ways of expelling that gas. In this particular case, when there's tissue gas, it's in the tissue, and the expelled air is getting caught by the tissue. So the tissue continues to expand, and it's not an immediate thing, but you can see it happening. If I took a time-lapse photography or a photograph and started 6 hours later, the person would look completely different. And it doesn't matter what you do with tissue gas, you have to know the person has tissue gas before or during the embalming process, which most times we do not know. And it only manifests itself afterwards. But if you know in advance, there are some chemicals that you can use in the embalming process that will arrest the ability for the cell to actually break down and what I call explode. One of the fastest ways that you can do it is to turn around and squeeze the tissue. And if you're squeezing the tissue, if you think there's edema, which is the natural, if you're in the hospital for a while being treated, there is edema or a swelling process, and you can put your fingers on there. It's almost like a Tempur-Pedic foam mattress where you can just rest your fingers on the back side of a hand for a moment, lift them, and the impression is there of your fingers. That's edema. If it's tissue gas, then as I press on that tissue, I'm going to feel a snap, crackle, and pop under the tissue. You can feel it actually popping. And that's when you start to, and most embalmers won't do that, especially if you see someone that you're getting ready to embalm and they look normal. You very seldom will take and hold the tissue thinking that, oh, okay, I'm going to go ahead and hold the tissue and see if there's a snap, crackle, pop feeling under that tissue, then I know it's tissue gas. But there are some cases, and that's one instance, but there are some cases, you want to be very cautious about telling a family they can see someone before you actually know the whole thing. I'm going to tell you another one. No, I'm not. Because that's in a podcast. We'll just make that for one full podcast. Never go to sleep locking your door with animals in the room.
I think we could probably imagine things, yeah.
What happened?
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh. It's terrible.
Are you looking at me right now because I just got a cat?
No. Cats aren't.
Okay, so cats are safe?
Cats are safer than dogs. But still, cats have ways of making their way to a deceased individual.
Oh, no.
What's
Not
that?
my Nelly.
Not my Nelly. But yeah, that's a great one. I think I'll add that to my podcast repertoire so that we can actually talk about that. You need to hear it.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're keeping score at home, next time you're on a flight, take a look outside that window. Maybe you've got some extra passengers with you, and tissue gas. You can add that to your vocabulary. That's kind of a fun one.
Snap, crackle, pop.
Snap, crackle, pop.
Does anyone remember that cereal? That commercial for that cereal?
Oh, come on.
Yeah,
remember it.
Why would you bring that up, Dad? I'll never eat Rice Krispies again. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Next question that we have comes from Tierra, who asks, what have you seen in your industry as the main reason that people work in that industry? So in other words, why do people do what you do? What's the main reason or the most common?
I think first off, if they're not licensed, I think first off, it's just the intrigue of wanting to work in a funeral home. And some people think it's interesting because of death. Not many people know about what takes place with death and what to expect when someone passes away. So I think there's a little bit of interest or intrigue. I don't know how else to describe it other than the fact that they just want to know kind of what happens within the mortuary itself. And so people will come in and ask for a job. But a lot of times when they come in, and you've seen this, Scott, when they come in and ask for a job, they really have no working background in a mortuary or funeral home. They just want to work there. And so without going ahead and being so blunt as asking why do you want to work here, you can actually determine just by the way they're talking with you and asking the questions that they have regarding what it is that we do on a day-to-day basis. So in answer to that question, I would say, first off, it's intrigue. I think in one of our earlier podcasts, I'd mentioned that my graduating class from the time we started was a third of what it was when we first started. And I think it's only because individuals then realize that, hey, it's not all what it's cracked up to be. I mean, when you get into areas of, say, for instance, embalming, and people realize that it's not always an easy embalm and that they're messy. I mean, they can be very messy, and people, with regards to how someone may pass away, they don't want to deal with that. So, yeah, I would think that the most is maybe wanting to know what happens in a funeral home. That intrigue aspect. I don't know. Do you guys have any other name that I could give it other than intrigue, interest, curiosity? Curiosity is probably the big one. So,
sure. So what you're saying is if enough people listen to this podcast, then the amount of funeral directors will decrease significantly.
Probably. Yeah, probably. Listen on, people.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't think that. I think there are some people that are cut out to be funeral directors or mortuary counselors, people that are designed mentally, that have that astute capability to actually interact with a family and see exactly what they want to have done and be able to do it.
Right. I think a lot of that is personal skills. I mean, the way that you interact with people is huge in that business. So very nice. I do want to be cognizant of time. I think we probably have time for one more, just so we're not distracting or taking too much before we talk about the story that we have for today. One last question submitted by Jay. Very interesting one. Basically, the question is, what can be included in the casket if I want a certain special item or anything to be buried with, or if I want to bury my loved one with something? What can be included, and what is the strangest thing that you've seen?
Okay. So you can actually bury whatever you want in a casket. I don't know of anybody, unless it's explosive. There is no real parameters, and I don't think anyone will stop a loved one from being able to stop. Oh,
Hold it. You mean I can't bury a bomb with my loved one?
well, no, not if you're going to explode it, Holly.
Shoot.
Oh, dang it. I know. So, yeah, I've seen people buried with their favorite armaments, plenty of bullets, beer, cigarettes, their favorite animals' cremated remains. I have seen, and I've actually, and this is, well, I've seen individuals where a mother was killed in an auto accident but was pregnant, where the baby was removed and then placed in the mother's arms to be buried with the mother outside the womb. So I think that there are golf clubs, cowboy hats, cowboys, rope. A guy was a tree climber and trimmer, so all of his equipment was buried with him. The same thing can happen with cremated remains. You can be cremated with the same things, excepting they would, if they don't cremate or break down, they're just discarded and thrown away. But they can be placed in the container with an individual that you're going to be cremating. They just need to know that it's not going to be able to be returned back to the family. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and just the only follow-up that I have is you cannot be buried with an explosive. Can you be cremated with an explosive?
Well, no.
Okay.
As it turns out, no. And as a matter of fact, any battery-operated device specific to pacemakers, they are always removed before cremations occur because they tend to explode because they're battery-operated. So even a small little explosion like that can create tremendous damage to a vehicle or to a retort, and we want to make sure that limited damage is done. Now, I will say this. There have been individuals cremated with bullets, and that's not good either. And people try to be tricky and sneaky by putting things in their pockets. And so we as a mortuary, we have just taken on the ability, whether we get permission or not, we will go through their pants and their pockets, and we will make sure that there is nothing explosive or that will explode with them when the cremation occurs. If there is, we just remove it.
That would make sense because
that's only for safety reasons too.
Oh yeah, you don't know what direction that's facing, and that heat is going to make it go off.
Mm-hmm.
So wow. Yeah. So the next question was submitted by Mark. He happened to be driving past a retirement home, and he saw a fire truck and an ambulance that was there, and so he assumed. So his question is, seeing this fire truck and this ambulance, could you tell me what is going on inside of that retirement home? What does it look like in there?
Okay, so there's two possibilities that have actually transpired. One is that the person has suffered a heart attack or maybe a stroke, and they just needed medical personnel to get there to take them to a hospital to help them continue to thrive and survive. The second is that the hospital or the nursing home staff or the assisted living staff found them unresponsive in their room. And if that's the case, then the individual probably has passed away. And Mark, what I would say is that when they've passed away in an assisted living facility, they usually have medical personnel that are actually helping take care of them physically. So that would mean that if the person is pronounced deceased in their room, then the family is notified. The family then notifies the mortuary of their choosing. The mortuary would come to the assisted living facility and then bring that individual into their care. On the other hand, if the assisted facility does or retirement community does not have medical personnel, but they leave it to the residents' responsibility to make sure that they are physically looked after and taken care of, then if that person does not have a doctor that would feel comfortable signing that death certificate, and it all boils down to the certificate of death, then the medical examiner is contacted. The medical examiner would then dispatch a vehicle out to the facility, bring that individual that's passed away into medical examiner care, where generally an autopsy is then performed so that they can go ahead and determine the actual cause of death.
Very interesting. That looks like all of the time that we have for those questions. Again, if you were listening and if you found these to be interesting or insightful, and if you thought, hey, I wonder about this or I wonder about that, go ahead and email us. Holly, tell us what the email is.
Yeah, of course. That email is letsbefrank@coffintalkin.com.
That will never get old.
It might.
And it might. And you know what? With that, let's go ahead and do our own version of Let's Be Frank. So again, quick reminder, I'm going to be reading the story that one of our listeners sent in today, and I'm going to gauge and get Scott and Frank's response on this story. So I'm going to just jump right in. This is from one of our listeners who has asked to remain anonymous. She says, hey, so I have a story I thought I'd share with you guys. I was just listening to your podcast again, and I was thinking about this creepy story that happened to us probably 6 months ago. My son had started waking up screaming in the middle of the night every night, or maybe a week at a time, and we just chalked it up to sleep regression or growth spurts or something. But then I started to get this feeling that maybe there is a demon in his room, because this wasn't his normal screaming fits. It was blood-curdling, filled with pain and fear. My husband and I threw all of our Jesus pictures in there and good vibes and hoped to ward off the demon. The next night he woke up again screaming. So I pulled him out of his bed around 3 a.m., got him a bottle, took him into bed with us so he could actually get a good night of sleep. That night I saw my door open, and I'm a really light sleeper, so I heard the doorknob actually turn and then the door open. Initially I thought it was my older daughter, about 4 or 5. Instead of asking if she could come into bed with us, I just heard her growling. And so I pushed her face away because I thought she was doing it to scare my son. And all I felt were her teeth as I pushed her face away. The next morning, I went into her room and apologized, thinking, I'm so sorry I pushed your face away last night. But why were you growling at your brother? And here's what she said. I wasn't in your room last night. I thought you were in my room growling at me. That freaked us out, but I remember touching teeth and it wasn't my kid. I assume it was some demon or weird spirit following my son around and scaring him at night. Thankfully, this is all in the past, and since that night, my son hasn't woken up screaming or anything like that.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's kind of gives you the chills.
I know.
As I hear the story. So first off, my first reaction is you never want to discount anything, any feelings or anything that you're actually experiencing physically. So I believe that actually can happen. The anonymous subscriber or listener, yeah, I think you did the right thing. And if she had actually focused on the so-called demon, quote unquote, I think she may have given it more energy, but where she was able to just push it away and just kind of think, go back to bed, that type of a thing. I think that it dispelled the energy as opposed to added to it. I think she did the right thing.
I think so too. And also my first thought after hearing that was, go you. You just pushed a demon away. You just slapped that demon in the face.
Good for you.
said, "Get out of here."
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
And again, I think that kind of reminds me of our story with Western Bob, where eventually you just had to say, look, you're not welcome here anymore. You've got to leave.
Yeah.
You are not welcome back in this facility. And eventually he didn't come back.
No.
So I think her doing that and pushing that demon away was her saying, you're not allowed here. Get back and don't come knocking again. And it hasn't since.
Yeah. I think with Western Bob too, there was no physical, I could not feel him physically, but I could see the denseness. So yeah, there is a difference there, but yeah, you're right.
That is very interesting. And I was actually going to ask that about the Western Bob, because I remember listening to that, but I couldn't remember if there was any physical feeling. Because I know that didn't you pass your hand through him?
Yeah, right.
Okay, yeah. So I guess there are different, on our limited knowledge of kind of what goes on, I guess there are different degrees.
Yeah, I don't know what they are. I don't pretend to know what they are.
Me neither. Yeah, I have no idea. Wow.
Yeah.
But all in all, great job, listener. You did the right thing.
Yeah.
I think that was fantastic. Good move. Always the right move to.
Thanks for sharing, by the way.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. If any of you out there have a story similar to this or completely different, or, anything that you want us to share, again, email us at coffintalkin. Oh my gosh, no, I got it wrong. Okay, forget that. Email us at letsbefrank@coffintalkin.com.
Wow, so it's already gotten old.
Yeah, it didn't take long.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Didn't take long at all.
Can I do one follow-up question? Did that listener did her daughter have any response? Because her daughter said, "Oh, I thought you were in my room."
Oh, that's a good
me. Was there any response? Did they say anything about that?
No, they said that it freaked them out. But I'm trying to put myself in her shoes. And I think if my daughter was saying, "No, you were growling at me," and now at this point you have that clarity that was a demon in her room, I'm not necessarily going to tell her it was, just to freak her out,
I think if the anonymous is listening to this and they want to add some additional insight to what the daughter's response was, that might be interesting.
Yeah, we can give a follow-up in a later episode. Yeah, any further questions, comments about that story?
You just gave me chills, and I know that it does happen more than what people realize.
So she got the Frank stamp of approval.
Yeah, I'm going to have a seal made.
Yeah, that's perfect. Let's be frank.
Let's be frank.
You were frank.
You've been franked.
You've been franked. Well, great. Well, thank you everyone for listening in to another episode. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at coffintalkin. And of course, email us at letsbefrank@coffintalkin.com. Thank you so much, Frank and Scott, for joining us.
Thanks.
Hey.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Keep sending in those questions. I love questions. That's how we learn.
Yeah, of course. And we'll be sure to feature them on future episodes. All right. See y'all later.
Bye.